Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. For those of you that like to get to the juicy story where you have the straightforward Bigfoot encounter, well, I've got that for you on this channel right now. But the full stories are really worth listening to, and I've got them listed at the bottom, because really, just the Bigfoot encounter without the whole experience from the beginning to the middle and the end is really worth listening to. But if you just want to get to the juicy encounter that people have sent in to me, by all means, here are a few examples of them right now on my channel. So get straight into the business, shall we? And let's get started.
"What the hell have you done?" I shrieked. "Have you just murdered someone?" I screamed. "Your wife, perhaps, or some poor girl?" The man looked at me with a look of terror on his face, as if he was guilty as hell and as if he'd been caught red-handed. And suddenly he just bolted off as fast as you can imagine. In that moment, I imagined this insidiously wicked and evil man had literally dragged a woman into the woods and murdered her in cold blood. There was no doubt that he was up to something. Did I chase after him and catch him, or go after the woman who may well be dead by now, the woman that had been screaming? I knew instinctively that there was a small chance that she could still be fighting for her life. Then I heard the horrifying scream all over again. A woman I now knew was in very definite serious distress, so I charged into the woods as fast as I could, searching for the anguished woman. There she was, squatting under a large oak tree, and she was lamenting, wailing and screaming as if she was in agonizing, inconsolable pain, and I could see why, because she was squatting over the dead body of a deceased loved one, and she was in a terrible, frantic state. I could sense and feel her agonizing, dreadful pain. I watched in absolute horror as she tried to shake the body, as if she was trying to bring it back to life, but it was completely useless because the body was very definitely dead, and it was not coming back to life. I just stood there in utter awe, watching this very tragic scene unfold before my very eyes, and tears of sorrow were pouring down my face. This woman who was grieving and pining so desperately was a colossal creature of about 8 foot tall, 700 pounds, and 4 feet wide. And yet, even though she was not human, she had such a human quality to her that was completely undeniable. I noticed she had very long arms, and that she was exceedingly muscular, with an enviable athletic body, that it was impressively strong, lofty and majestic. For a moment I stood still, not knowing what to do. But then, on a burst of irrational emotional impulsiveness, I rushed towards this ape-like humanoid and cradled her in my arms, without any concern for my safety whatsoever. In that moment I didn't care about my own vulnerability, because my desire to comfort her far exceeded and outweighed any fear that I actually felt towards this creature. I think sensing and feeling this female's raw pain and desperate suffering was utterly intolerable for me to just stand and watch, and I simply had to reassure her in some way. I had to relieve her of the tortured distress and insurmountable grief that she was feeling. The joke was I was so small and pathetically puny in contrast to this colossal creature that I could not even wrap my arms around her gargantuan form. However, that was not even remotely significant, because she responded warmly to my touch and even ran her large hands through my hair, ruffling it up affectionately with her sausage-sized fingers so that it stood up in spikes. I believe that this was an expression of affectionate appreciation for me. I do remember I could hear her heart pounding through her hairy chest, and even feel her soft breasts against my body, because I was that close to her. She was whimpering exactly like a dog that's distressed, and was patting my back with her big hands, and I could feel that she was so comforted and reassured by my presence. I knew that my physical touch had been exactly what she needed right now, and I had succeeded in comforting her. I was so grateful for that. I did not want to be alone. I did not want her to be alone in her grief. and I had no idea if she had any other family member who might be there to help her in this grievous time. I certainly hoped that she did, because I couldn't bear to think of her alone in her suffering. After a while I pulled away, and she looked at me with her big, sad, rusty-coloured eyes, and pointed very, very sadly to the dead body that lay on the ground. I examined the brawny, sinewy, hefty body, and discovered some gunshots on its head, chest, and shoulders. There were so many, it was unbelievable. My fingers were now covered in blood from my inspection. I realised that this poor creature had not stood a chance, and had been assaulted by bullets and killed by the poacher in the woods that had run away so furtively and so hastily. The hairy humanoid chattered away to me in a language that I couldn't understand, that sounded remarkably like gibberish, and then she physically acted out to me what had happened by miming the man with the gun, whom on seeing the male creature had clearly just fired several rounds at the critter without discrimination. The dead hairy humanoid was titanic in size and was easily over 1,000 pounds, and yes, he was scary, he was intimidating and terrifying to look at, but that didn't excuse being assaulted at with so many bullets. However, from what the creature communicated to me, this large ape-like humanoid had done nothing to deserve being killed like this, because he hadn't imposed any threat whatsoever, and had intended the man no harm. He had only been interested and curious in the human, and had been peeking at him from behind a tree, and had accidentally been spotted by the sharp beady eyes of the poacher, who had run after him, shooting aggressively for many, many rounds. In my book, this creature was so human-like, it was equivalent to being murdered, and I began to feel this enraged anger and fury towards the poacher rising up in the back of my throat like a huge wave of nausea. I really wanted to puke in absolute disgust, as this man should not have killed this creature in cold blood like this, and clearly this was not a case of self-defence. I watched the very distressed, stoic creature digging away the ground with her very large hands, using a large stone to remove the soil, which by all appearances was exceedingly hard to shift, but believe me, she made light work of it. She made it look easy. It must have taken her only 20 minutes to dig this massive grave. She then literally rolled her partner's body into the grave very, very slowly, and then jumped in the grave to be with him. She was stroking his body for a very long time, whimpering and touching him. And then finally she jumped out of the grave. It was then that I helped her pile and layer the soil back into the grave, and we began to create a huge burial mound together. The creature then gathered some massively large stones that would have been impossible for a man to lift, but she picked them up with effortless ease, as if they weighed nothing, and encircled them around the grave, and finally she picked a couple of sticks and placed them on a grave in what looked like a very deliberate sign. Finally she sat down grievously and continued to whimper, but I used my words to comfort and reassure her, and I even sang her some songs. I think my voice did soothe her, because she looked grateful, and she appeared to be nodding her head in time to my singing. That wasn't very tuneful, I might add. I got up and indicated that I was going away, but I would be coming back very shortly. I rarely sensed she understood what I was trying to communicate, which was amazing, because I'm not the best of actors. At this time it was about 8 in the morning, I imagine, and I thundered excitedly into the main kitchen like a rhino at full charge, nearly knocking over the shocked chef, who eyed me with a startled, rather bedraggled look on his face. "I've never seen anyone this eager for breakfast before," he said. The cook was preparing breakfast for his distinguished, esteemed guests, because even when it's not hunting season on the estate, they still invariably have guests staying, who book the cabins on the land and enjoy the extracurricular activities on offer, like horse riding, fishing and hiking. The chef who prepares the scrumptious morning buffet breakfasts was rather surprised to see me piling plastic lunchboxes with copious amounts of crispy bacon, ham, cheeses, scrambled eggs, warm crisp potato wedges, sliced fruit, crisp vegetables, guacamole and cereals, not to mention bottles of juice. I told the surprised chef that I was having a picnic, who regarded me as if I was a starved prisoner of war being exposed to food for the first time. "You must be hungry," he said. "That's enough for 20 people." "I'm starved," I lied. "I could eat for 20 people." I then proceeded to scurry out of the kitchen as fast as I could, very, very eagerly, so much so that a few eyes watched me racing out with my hands loaded with food parcels. I did happen to overhear conversations of people asking each other if they had heard gunshots at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and it did seem to appear that indeed gunshots had not escaped the people's staying attention. I said nothing and ran into the woods, where the female creature was sitting by her partner's grave, and she had been expecting me and waiting patiently. When I opened the plastic containers, she was chattering away excitedly, looking absolutely jubilant. She opened the plastic containers eagerly, like a kid unwrapping Christmas presents at Christmas, and opened each container as if she couldn't wait to see what was inside. She let out a very excited whoop, which made me laugh. I could sense her jubilation, and we sat under the oak tree, eagerly eating together. And I've never ever eaten with anyone that appreciated every mouthful as much as this creature did. When she ate the crispy bacon, she looked at me with her golden eyes, and they lit up with pleasure, and she moaned with ecstasy when she ate the bacon, eggs, potatoes and hams that she just absolutely loved. We sat there for ages enjoying each other's company as if we'd been friends all our lives. The creature was ravenously hungry and literally licked the plastic containers completely clean. And then she handed them back to me, but I showed her how you could use the Tupperware containers to keep stuff in, and then she understood what I was trying to tell her. She decided that she would keep the containers as a gift. She was so pleased, she picked up pebbles from the forest floor and shook them in the plastic containers rather like a rattle, and looked up at me with bright, rather amused eyes. She was so appreciative and thankful. Finally, she indicated that she needed to go, as she pointed towards the mountainous valleys where I imagined she actually lived. It was densely forested up there, with some hilly, rocky ravines. I immediately hugged her, and was enfolded by her massive form, and felt her incredible warmth and love wrapped around me. It was like being in the arms of something that was so big and so loving. It was probably as close as I was ever going to get to feel the love of God around me. I'm not ashamed to say that I started crying because I was so sad to see her go. And I wanted to spend so much more time with her because she enchanted me, and she was so human-like, so accepting, and just so authentic. When I told Peter what had transpired, he was absolutely enraged with me for not waking him up.
So there we are. That's the juicy bits of our stories tonight. I personally think you should go back and listen to the whole story because it makes it so much more exciting, because then you learn all about where it happened, the location, and all about the fabulous characters involved in the story, and that makes the story so much more gripping. But as I say so, go down to the description and then click on to the YouTube link, and then you will hear the whole story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.